Let me just go ahead and welcome Steve to this webinar and say how delighted we are to have you, as always, and especially today because you're going to show us all kinds of exciting new advances in Mind Mirror, and we just appreciate what you do and that you're here with us to do that. I think everybody, why don't y'all all wave to Steve? Say thank you, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Stop.
Hi, Steve.
I'm English. I can't take this.
I know. That's why I did it.
Thanks. Okay. Right. So let's get started. If you're going to do neurofeedback, the one thing you need to make absolutely certain of, but I guess everyone knows this, is that if you have stressed when they come to see you, or you're going to do neurofeedback on yourself and you're stressed, all you're really going to be doing is training stress. So you need to try and get people as relaxed as possible before they do the neurofeedback. And the simplest way of doing that is to get them to breathe properly. So as Judith says, later on we'll be looking at the way of getting them to breathe at what's called the resonant frequency, the frequency where the HRV is maximized and the breath and the heart are entrained together, so they rise and fall at the same time. But let me cover a bunch of other things before we start. Peter and I have been speaking about the ES meter, and I've spoken to Judith on this a couple of occasions. The ES meter is a way of monitoring where you are or where you've come from, shall we say, from where you started the session, and whether you're relaxing, whether you're sleeping, whether you're panicking, like I am, or whether you're just focused and sort of taking stuff in. Let me share a screen with you which shows the ES meter in Velastus. Now this is a new meter. Okay, so what we have here is 4 quadrants. So we have top left, relaxed and attentive; top right, active involvement; bottom left, lethargic or drowsy; and bottom right, panic. Okay, now I don't know how many of you do hypnotherapy, for example, but one of the problems you have as a hypnotherapist is you're never quite certain whether someone's in an Esdale state, a very relaxed and sort of attentive state, but in a deep trance, or whether they're asleep. One of the only ways of really knowing that is whether their peripheral skin temperature has either increased or decreased. So what we can do with the ES meter, let me just go ahead and record this. And I should point out I'm using a testing tool so I can manipulate these numbers. What we do here is we can test the temperature. So I'm using my temperature sensor here. So as I increase the temperature goes up. As I decrease it, it goes down. Now that's obviously monitoring the peripheral skin temperature of the skin, so that if, for example, I was asleep, the skin would naturally get colder and we'd be moving into the lethargic or drowsy state. You'll notice, by the way, that panic is on the same spectrum as lethargic and drowsy. That's because obviously as we get more panicky, as we get more stressed, the blood tends to go to the core and leave the periphery. So one of the ways of detecting panic is seeing what's happening with skin temperature. One of the other ways, by the way, of sorting out some forms of migraine is to get people to raise their skin temperature. Because if you can raise the peripheral skin temperature, what you can also do is obviously expand the capillaries, and that gets the blood flowing through the body, and in some cases can reduce some types of migraine. Okay, so there's the temperature going up and down as I take it off and on. What we can also do is, if we had the galvanic skin response, we would see this moving as well along the horizontal axis. So if, for example, I was getting more panicky, you would see that happening there as we're moving to the bottom right-hand corner. On the other hand, if I'm getting into a relaxed and attentive state, let's say a meditative state, then you would want to see the snail going over to the other side. So you see here, it will be moving over. Now, one of the things I'm working on at the moment is getting the Lesch scale put into this meter, so you can actually see from 0 to 6 where you are on the Lesch scale using this. So at the moment we have what you would call an absolute scale with the Lesch scale. This allows you to have a relative scale. So, for example, you see we're actually over right on the sort of the middle of the relaxed and attentive. If I was to, example, press R, that resets it in the middle. So now I can see the deflection again from there. Does that make sense? Peter, if you want to jump in on this, because you're the expert on the ES meter, if I'm saying anything or I'm not covering anything, please jump in, okay?
Okay, I mean, if you, the way Lesch typically works is you're starting at a kind of normal state, so neither over aroused or under aroused, and that's the beginning of, say, Lesch 0. So that would correspond to the middle of the crosshairs on the display. So naturally, the start of Lesch 0 is going to be the vertical line, and then if you imagine a scale going out to the left, Lesch 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those would be gradations going leftwards along the horizontal scale. So what we're saying is implicitly by, if you're centering, the way Steve just centered it, if you center it when someone's in a kind of normal, not over-aroused, not over-relaxed state like that, then that's the start of our Lesch 0. So it works naturally with this type of scale, assuming you're centering it in that context.
Is that okay? Does everyone understand that?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
But Steve, you're saying that that you have both the GSR and the temp meter on now, and what you're going to do is add the GSR scale? Right.
So the scale is essentially, in this particular case, the idea is that from here you could see, as Peter was saying, on the left-hand side, on the horizontal scale, you would see a series of break marks where it would say Lesch 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you are sitting relaxed and then you go into whatever altered state you're in, you will be able to see relatively where you were on that Lesch scale. Okay? Whereas now the Lesch scale is more absolute. It says that at I don't know, 100,000 kiloohms, you're at Lesch state 1, for example. What this is doing, it's saying in relation to where you start, Lesch scale 1 is 100,000 to the left. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right.
And let me just point out before you go on, for those who might not have attended this webinar wherein you and Peter were talking about the development of this some time ago, is that the primary benefit for awakened mind trainers is that this is the way and the only way that we can tell whether people are dropping into trance or a deep subconscious meditating trance or dead out fall asleep.
Right.
Because a lot of times we'll see people lose their alpha and drop into high amplitude theta and delta, and you know they'll be snoring, and after the meditation you think, oh well, they were dead asleep the whole time. And indeed, you ask them what their experience was, and they said, oh, I had the most wonderful meditation, I heard you the whole time. But with this ES meter on, or even just the temperature meter, then you can tell, you can watch their temperature. And since we had this conversation on this webinar, I had a temp meter and I've been using it with people. You can absolutely digitally tell whether they are drifting and dropping away or whether they're warming up, because when they're falling asleep, they're cooling off, and when they're going deeper into a subconscious trance, they're warming up, even though you have the theta delta. So it is the only way for us to be able to tell. I mean, you know, if somebody's got nothing but delta and they fall out of the chair, okay, well, they were asleep. But short of that, and this is just such a big boon to us. Those of you who can afford to buy a temperature meter, you'll get this ES meter software free with that. I don't know what they cost.
$150. It's very cheap at the moment, given the pound is taking a dive.
That's right.
Pounds or US?
Pounds, but frankly, it's going to be parity soon anyway.
Yeah, just pretty much the same.
I want to talk about heart rate variability at the end of this. Heart rate variability is very important. It is, I think, probably the thing you would do before you do neurofeedback. The challenge with doing, as I said right at the beginning of this, Hello, David, by the way. The challenge of doing neurofeedback on a stressed person is you are just really training the stress. So heart rate variability, getting that down, getting high heart rate variability is very good. Let me park that and let's come on to what I think I'm on here for to do, which is to see how do we do neurofeedback with Villistus. Given that you've all seen the Mind Mirror, what extra facilities do we have within the Villistus software to do classic neurofeedback? So what I'm going to do is very briefly take you through the 4 different methods we can do neurofeedback with Villistus. And then we just open that up to questions, and then we'll do the HRV that Judith talked about earlier. So let me just share this screen with you again, if I can. Okay, so we have a number of different ways of doing neurofeedback. For example, if you've done the clinical cue, or if you've been told that you have to reduce theta at, I don't know, T3, there are a number of ways within the Villistus software to be able to do that. The simplest is quick protocol. You select the channel. First of all, let me load a session which has actually got an EEG in it. You basically say, okay, I want to do channel 1, and it says, what do you want to do? Well, I want to reduce or inhibit theta. Then you can either have a manual threshold or an auto threshold. My experience of auto thresholding is it's very good and very bad at the same time. Very good because it allows you to get a baseline, if you like, almost like a tonic level of theta. Very bad because if you're in a bad state, or you've just spent 3 hours in a car before you start your process, because auto thresholding tries to keep you at a given level of reward, typically 70%. If you are in a bad way, then all that's going to happen is it's going to keep dropping that threshold in order to achieve that level. So having auto thresholding on for an entire session is not very good. Villistus, on the other hand, allows you to say, okay, I want to take a 2-minute or a 5-minute level, and after that it's going to fix. So basically, a simple protocol is to inhibit theta wherever you've got the electrode, let's say T3. You press start, press record, and you notice here the threshold is changing, and that green light there is showing whether you're being rewarded or inhibited. Okay? Now, this is designed to be used with the multimedia feedback. So you would have a movie or a video, an MP3 or something like that, which you would have playing for the client, and then give whether they're above or below the threshold, they get the particular reward or inhibit. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the clinical cue. One of the benefits of the clinical cue is the ability to not only provide what we call probes, which is things to talk about with the client. One of the things, and I don't know how many of you know about what Dr. Swingle has done, but his view is that, well, he is the person people go to as a last resort. And what tends to happen is these people have been through many therapists beforehand, and generally speaking, these people, and you probably know them yourself, they will come to you and they will give you their story, and that story is pretty down pat by the time they get to you. They've told it to so many people that they're very used to telling it. So what Swingle does, he says, I don't want to know what your problem is, I will tell you. And as a result of doing the clinical cue, it comes up with a series of what he called probes, things to talk about with the client. So he would then go through those probes and say, well, you know, it looks to me like you've got fuzzy thinking, or you've been depressed, or you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, or something like that. And the client is absolutely amazed that he can read their mind. Well, what he's actually doing is he's just taking the results of the EEG, looking at the probes, and then saying, fine, okay, these are the issues that look to me to be the most important. Once he's got that information, he can then decide what protocols to use. Now, with the clinical queue with Villistas, you not only get the probes, you not only get the issues of where that information is. In other words, has it come from CZ? Has it come from O1? Has it come from the frontal lobes? It also gives you a list of protocols you should use if that client has that problem. So, for example, if he has a balance issue at CZ, the spreadsheet that we provide says, well, try doing a theta-beta ratio at CZ. Okay? So the second way to do, bear with me while I just share my screen again with you. The second way to do feedback is using the neurofeedback protocols. And these are a list of the protocols that come with clinical Q. So, for example, there is a classic theta-beta ratio where you suppress high beta. So let's just select that. And what would happen then is, you see here, you've got the theta-beta ratio at the bottom with the ideal parameters, in this case 1.5 and 2.5, and you notice the high beta has a floating threshold. So we're trying to inhibit high beta and keep the theta-beta ratio in between 1.5 and 2.5. So that's the second way of doing it. The third way is to buy a third-party game. We interface very closely with the Zucor products, and in fact the interface to the Zucor product is very simple. You select Zucor Interactive, and there it is. By the way, for customers of Villistas, you now get 2 of the Zucor products free of charge. So if you want 2 free games to use with your clients, then talk to me and I can give you the download links. They are the first games in the Carnival series and the first games in the Sports series, and they're very good games. I guess anyone who's been in the industry for a while is fairly jaded when it comes to video games or computer games for neurofeedback. Generally, they're written by people like me who have absolutely no artistic ability at all when it comes to this sort of thing, and don't play video games in my spare time. The Zucor products have been written by games designers and games developers, so they're very good quality. And as I say, you get 2 free when you use Villistas. So it's a way of getting into that, and you can see whether your clients are actually going to benefit from playing video games. One of the things I've always said about video games is that, generally speaking, they're designed to be immersive, so they will pull you into the game and raise your heart rate. That's, I mean, basically the whole concept of these shoot-em-ups and games with racing cars and things like that is it's designed to really get you and hold you. The Zucor products, and I'd say the 2 free ones that you would get, are interesting, but they're not immersive. So they kind of keep your interest through the process of doing neurofeedback, but you're never drawn right into the game. So that's something to think about for the future. Okay, so that's the third method. So we have the quick protocols, we have the neurofeedback protocols that come with a clinical queue, we have the Zucor games, and then we have the traditional way of doing neurofeedback in not only Villistas, but a number of other of the neurofeedback products or software products out there, which is where you essentially grow your own. And let me just show you how easy or how it is to do that. So let me get rid of that picture for a moment. So let's assume you wanted to do, I don't know, you wanted to inhibit theta. You would put an instrument on the screen, you would right click and you'd set up the feedback options. I don't intend to do this because it's long-winded and it's not necessary. But the point is, if you wanted to do something that we don't do as a part of the software, then you can easily put them into the software yourself, store it away as a screen set, and bring it back and then use it for your clients later on. So essentially, those are the 4 different ways of doing neurofeedback. One of the other things I wanted to mention was the business of feed forward and feedback. Now, because Judith and I had a miscommunication, shall we say, there's the term audio-visual entrainment on the information on the website. And generally this is where you have a pair of glasses like that. and you put them on and it flashes lights at you, and you have a pair of cans on and it hits you with tones, so you get binaural beats, you get the frequencies you want to entrain to, and you get the lights. How many of you have actually used AVS systems? Okay, cool. We've taken this one stage further. What we've decided to do, I mean, obviously we can do that, and these glasses are in fact our own AVS system. We've also gone into the area of hypnagogia. So, for example, we have a lamp which you sit, you close your eyes, and it flashes light at you. And within about 30 seconds or so, people who are experiencing hypnagogia tell me they're in a deep experience of that. So they're seeing the platonic solids, they're seeing all kinds of images being brought up. And this happens literally within about 30 seconds. The product itself, let me see if I can show you, is a thing called Hypnolumiere. So what you see there is the lamp, which is in fact in a standard angle poise lamp. It has 64 LEDs, quite strong LEDs, that flash at you white. And you notice in the bottom left of the right-hand corner there, you also see Villistus. So what you also get is not only feed forward, but you're getting the feedback too. So the lamp actually adjusts to how you're working. So this is AVS, or audiovisual entrainment, with EEG. And that, if you like, is the fifth way of doing feedback. Because not only can you use the AVS system for feed forward, where you're doing just the entrainment, but you can also use it for feedback too, which enhances the feed forward processing when you want to do that offline. So essentially, we have 5 different ways of doing feedback. All of them use slightly different methods, but they all seem to work pretty well from what we get. Yes, sorry, go on, Robin.
So is there a possibility, are we going to go in more detail about setting up protocols?
I wasn't planning on doing that today. If you wanted to do that, I'm more than happy to do that. I just wanted to show today the various different ways of doing things, and then if there was a demand, then we could go into it in more detail.
Okay.
But we can ask some general questions about it. I think I have some general questions, and other people will also, because that was kind of a quick zoom through.
Yeah, well,
absolutely. I kind of wanted to give you an overview and a flavour, rather than try and spend a lot of time looking at each individual thing.
Okay. Well,
Right.
I do have a lot of questions. I'm really excited about the possibility of having the clinical Q, and I haven't done one yet, so I will do one and then go from there. But just the question of, if you're going to do the clinical Q, then you would want to go in and set your frequencies to the individual rather than using a generalized frequency. Otherwise, you're going to run into difficulties for that individual person. And then other thing is, how you go in, where do you see where the regular frequencies are that you have in your standards? So those could be just maybe shifted a little bit rather than having to set up a whole new profile for somebody.
Okay, so there are 2 questions there. One is, okay, so we need to set the frequencies. For example, some people may want to change the theta, for example, from 4 to 8 to 4 to 9, or 3 to 8, or whatever it is. That is certainly possible to do with Villistus, and I'll show you that in a minute. In terms of the clinical Q itself, what it tends to suggest is reducing alpha, for example, or theta-beta ratio, or the ratio between beta and high beta. This is what Swingle does. He says, okay, do the theta-beta ratio at CZ, do something at F2 or F3 or F4, something like that. So as you go through the clinical Q, it gives you a sort of step-by-step process to provide you with, essentially, the protocols you should use. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. I've used the kind of setup before with Swingle's ratios and stuff.
Right.
And it is pretty useful for some people. But I just wonder, it's just still general, very general. And you can get into difficulties with that with individuals.
Right.
That's all.
Okay, fine. Okay. Sorry, Deborah, did you have a question?
Well, and then may I just add to Robin's that before Deborah starts, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Robin, that would be where you would use the last thing that Steve showed us, where you would, you know, if you have in-depth knowledge as you do of neurofeedback, then you would go to the, not the shortcuts he showed us, not the quick protocols, not the neurofeedback protocols, but the last thing where you set all the thresholds yourself.
You can actually do that with the clinical cue. I'm sorry, with the quick protocol. You can set the threshold you want for yourself. You can set the bands for the frequencies yourself. In fact, why don't I show you how that is? That's the simple thing.
That'd be great.
So, first of all, you can set the bands by just, okay, there's theta, for example, at 4 to 8. You can change that to whatever you want it to be. You can add your own bands, so if you want to do high alpha, if you want to go with Demos's book, you notice here I've got beta 1 through 4. You can put as many of these different bands in there as you want. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is, I mentioned about the auto thresholding here. If you don't want to auto threshold, you can actually just type a number in there. So you can set the threshold you want. So, you know, we say, okay, we're happy now, we've got the theta band that we want to inhibit that, and we want to inhibit it at a particular level of microvolts. Yep, Deborah?
And while you're doing that, one way to individualize it would be to just watch how the threshold is changing, because you have that working in real time. So you can get an idea, individual by individual, where their average might be and where you want to start, and use that as your starting threshold. I think that would be a really simple, dirty way of quickly establishing something.
I personally prefer to do maybe a minute or 2 minutes of auto thresholding, just so I get what I
range
the guy's person's tonic level, and that's because at the end of the day, you know that if someone has spent 2 hours in the spa or whatever relaxing, is going to be in a different mental state to someone who's driven through traffic for 3 hours to get to you. So being able to just get a quick, as you say, a quick and dirty threshold for that is a good place to start, and then you can then begin to change the thresholds manually.
Curious about how Andrea is using this. You know, we're working with the awakened mind. We're really looking at optimization of performance or enhancing performance, and so we're using it as slightly, the awakened mind is slightly different way. And my understanding was that she was using the clinical cue to sort of get a base. And I know Swengel uses the cue, of course, to normalize the brain, calls normalize first, and then does the optimization training for whatever the client population may be that he's working with. So I'm just kind of curious to see, you know, get some feedback from Andrea as how she's using it. It sounded like she was going the back and forth, you know, with that, with the mind mirror, using actually the mind mirror to train that optimization after she gets a clinical cue readout.
Yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit to Gary before, so I'll just repeat it for those of you who weren't online at the moment. So Andrea Groh is the only other person right now in the world besides me who's training practitioners, although Gary and Donna will start that soon, and so will others. And Andrea took a bunch of neurofeedback courses so she could get a broader context and understand more about how our world fits in, my mirror world fits in, and also be able to read studies and understand what they were saying. She talks about this on the interview of this previous webinar, which was terrific. And what she does is does the swingle on her private clients. She also does them to illustrate it to her practitioner trainees to be able to see if they have brain anomalies. And if they have brain anomalies, then, so let's take an example, say they have low alpha. Well, then she takes them over to her desk and puts them on the Mind Mirror self-training program, and will train them for alpha generation or alpha theta or alpha synchrony. And those are all programs that are already contained within the Mind Mirror self-training program. And what she said was that there was one client who had actually her alpha was split. She would have a big flare up at 12.5 and then a flare on the other side at 9. And so her alpha was flaring all over the place and not synchronized with itself and not symmetrical either. And so she put them on. Actually, she asked Steve to engineer, and he did, this self-training program called Alpha Synchrony, which only rewards you for 10.5 alpha on both sides of the brain symmetry. And this is partly for people who were slipping into sleep. They would have that alpha peak at 9 and some even lower, and then they would lose, well, the alpha would go down into theta, and then they couldn't remember, and their imagery was too murky. So Alpha Synchrony rewards only at 10.5. And what she found was that people who were on the self-training program after finding Swingle anomalies, the Mind Mirror self-training program, were getting 10% more rewards within 10 minutes for the awakened mind. Just snap fast. And you know, she's a whiz with Excel, so she tracks everything, tracks people's progress. She goes into the Mind Mirror summary and gets the Mind Mirror summary statistics, training summary statistics, and she plots everything. And she's definitely saying that they can come right out of the Swingle clinical queue, go onto the Mind Mirror self-training programs alone, not neurofeedback, just what we've already got in there, and wake up and their imagery is clearer, they're not slipping away. It's a really neat program. Interview with her, you might want to just check it out. But on the other hand, if they have profound issues, we would certainly want to send them to a neurofeedback expert, you know, like Robin or Cindy or somebody who really knows what they're doing, because these programs that Steve has shown us are wonderful for people who have so-so issues. You know, maybe they need to have a little bit of cleanup work. Maybe they're not getting any imagery, but I don't know that. We didn't say this on the last webinar, but I had talked previously to both Robin and Cindy about it, and they were both saying that we should be cautious about using neurofeedback for anything but experimental self-training, and not using it with clients, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're rearranging someone's brain. Yeah?
It's very true.
Yeah. So, of course, we are too, but we're rearranging it in what we know is the best way, right? Yeah, so listen, before Steve goes on, Peter, can I ask you if you had any comment about what Steve was saying about the hypnagogic lamp and using that with EEG, because didn't Max use the stroboscopic lamp as well?
You know, it was just a separate device. It was used. One thing which I hadn't realized when I spoke with Steve, and he told me about the lamp, is that it doesn't have a sort of red-pink filter. So am I right? The idea is you look through closed eyes.
Yes.
So that will give you a kind of red-pink filter, probably through the skin. Anyway, yeah. No, I mean, the big one in the classroom basically had a red. You were looking at, all right, it was a white fluorescent. You were seeing it through a red screen. So what you saw was basically light that was red, but you had eyes open with it, which meant you could look at all the instruments at the same time. But it was never coupled in. And I mean, personally, I can't recall it ever being used with an individual. It was always used with groups in a more general way. So, I mean, that kind of feedback wouldn't be relevant, really. Now, it does sound interesting, I must say, but you'd have to just try it. I've no idea what the consequences are.
Well, try
I mean,
these.
have you used it? Well,
Sorry?
someone has, yeah.
We launched the whole thing at some hypnotherapy shindig in Rome a few weeks ago. We were just sitting in reception, and people were having these experiences. We gave them 7 minutes blast of the lamp, and all of them, without exception, were dropping into this hypnagogic state really quickly. It was quite fascinating to watch.
But when you talked about using it as a sort of feed forward,
right? I mean, the feed forward is that. The feedback obviously is trying to entrain it to a particular frequency, depending on whether you want to do that. The key thing with AVE is that it is literally just feed forward. You're just being blasted with a particular frequency in the hope that it's going to entrain you to that frequency. Having the feedback loop with EEG, can I just finish and maybe... having the feedback loop with EEG, you can detect what your dominant frequency is. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to come down from 16 to 10 in one go, it goes 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, and then goes down like that. That's the concept, and it seems to work quite well. We've had it hooked into the ProScion AVS system for 2 or 3 years now, and people seem to like the way it works. Sorry, girls, you had some questions.
I just was wondering if you can change the frequencies on the lamp, or is it set at a certain frequency?
No, it's completely tailorable from 1 hertz to, well, 50.
You know, and I'm really curious about it. If I try it and don't like it, can I return it?
Yes.
Okay, because
I did find there were two women who tried it, and because it's quite strong, I suspect it was taking them into a place they didn't want to be, and they stopped immediately.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if you really don't like it, don't do it.
Yeah, I've had trouble with my clients. My population of clients are trauma agitated clients, and AV is really distressing for them.
Right.
But the lamp might be different than the goggles.
Yeah, maybe.
You can look away.
But a tad expensive, eh, Steve, for the lamp?
Well, you can use the glasses. The glasses do the same thing. Sorry, Deborah, you were going to ask a question?
And it has to do with that luminaire.
Right.
Have you had any problems with stimulating seizures in people?
Okay, so number one is we never use 16 hertz because that is the seizure frequency. Second thing is we're very careful about pre-selecting people. The first question we ask is, do you get photosensitive epilepsy? Have you had seizures in the past? And if people have said yes to either of those, thank you very much. Move on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because you're using very bright LED lights.
Correct.
I would really kind of be worried about certain populations.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, as I say, the first question is, have you ever had a seizure? Second thing is, we don't use 16 hertz because as everybody knows, that is the seizure frequency. And the third thing, as I say, is, you just...
Photosensitivity.
Right, exactly.
Steve, so just add a bit on the one which was in Max's class. It was never really used on a single frequency. It always had a program where basically it ran through frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it does.
But it only went up to alpha. So
this goes...
basically did delta, theta, alpha. It wouldn't go above that.
Well, this goes up. You can program this to any frequency you want, and it's an LED. So anything
that was deliberate.
It's going to be white anyway.
Yeah, and what I found was that people who had difficulty showing symmetry, the strobe would be a great help.
There is another thing. At the risk of making this into a sales presentation, I really don't want to do that. The challenge with a lamp, of course, is it's just one light. With this, you get 2 essentially channels, so you can actually alter the frequency left and right. So you can begin to change what people see, left and right. So you can have 5 hertz at this side and 7 hertz at that side, or whatever. Yes, Deborah?
Well, then you're using an analog of binaural beats, only visual.
Yes.
That's exactly what you've just done. I mean, if you give different flashes to each eye, the brain is going to try and interpret between them. Okay.
Right, and then you'll entrain to that frequency. Absolutely.
That's a very fascinating concept because I've never heard binaural beats, a visual version of it.
I've never really given it that. I've never thought about that, but yeah.
That's the exact analog.
Why not?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Because I was going to ask you, you know, what do they see when you do that?
Well, the first, I mean, I don't know whether you've tried it yourself, but certainly when I've used the lamp myself, you begin to see the platonic solids very quickly. I mean, for the people who don't know about this, because you're playing basically random light on the eyes, the brain tries to make sense of it. So and in doing that, you begin to see it creates shapes, because the brain is in the business of creating shapes or creating patterns that it recognizes. So number one, you'll begin to see the platonic solids, the squares, the cubes, the circles, the triangles, whatever. And then a number of people were seeing issues. So one of the women said that we did it with, there were some people crowding in on me. She was sitting by herself in an armchair with no one around her, but she had the feeling of just being in the middle of a crowd with heads. Her brain was creating all of this, obviously, but she had this feeling that she was in the middle of a crowd and was basically saying, keep it away, this is my land. Who knows what's going on in her brain? But the point is, it made sense to her. And what we find with hypnagogia is that it's another way of pulling people's past thoughts out, and basically it's another way of getting them over the alpha bridge, if you like.
Well, you're pulling from the unconscious. You're literally pulling it up into consciousness. Yes. What a clever thing. How much is that thing?
Okay. I'm
just wondering.
You'll hate the price.
How many people have used the P. Roshi?
I have absolutely no idea. Well, I haven't.
Has anyone used the P. Roshi? No. Anyone know anything about it?
No.
Yes.
No.
The guy is an interesting character. Chuck, is it Chuck? Yeah, interesting guy. Interestingly enough, he started off Roshi. The Roshi used to have an EEG feedback loop, but they removed that 10 years ago.
Our friends down the clinic here still use the old Roshi with the feedback loop.
Right.
And that's their primary way of treating.
Yep. I mean, it's a classic way of doing it. It's a very simple way of getting into the unconscious, and having that loop back with EEG means that you've got a much better way of tailoring the session to what the person is presenting, rather than just flashing 10 hertz in the hope that you're going to get them into alpha. Okay? Shall we go on and talk about, I mean, if everyone's comfortable with that, can we go on and talk about HRV training?
Before we leave that, how much are the glasses? Are they available yet?
The glasses, we are just about to release them. What I'll do, if I may, is I will send you a brochure on them.
Please,
If anyone else wants them, I can send them out. It's basically a brochure that gives you the prices and things like that. So, Judith, can I ask you, if I send it to you, could you distribute it? Because I don't have everyone's email address. Is that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Right. HRV. Now, obviously, some of you have got much more experience of HRV than I have and use it in clinical practice. So the idea is, and obviously using things like the HeartMath product, for example, which is designed specifically to get you into a nice, sort of, if you like, sine wave of breath and heart. Now, what we can do, obviously, with Velastus is have a respiration belt, so you can actually see the respiration and the heartbeat at the same time. But even if you don't do that, one of the things that you get with the resonant frequency is apparently, and it seems to work, a doubling or at least an increase in the amount of HRV, even in people of my age. And at the same time, it appears that you're entraining the heart and the breath by pretty much instantaneously. Okay. Now the challenge is, of course, that everyone has a slightly different resonant frequency. While we apparently keep them all our adult lives, mine, for example, might be 6.5 breaths a minute, while Judith's might be 6 and Oksana's maybe 7. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is understand what your resonant frequency is. Deborah, you've done work with this? Have you done work with resonant frequencies?
Not really, no.
Okay, fine.
No.
All right, so this is going to be fairly new to everybody. That's okay. Let me show you, if I can, again. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so it's very simple. The Villistas provides what's known as a pacer, which is fairly standard. Every product has it. But what we do is we allow you to configure that pacer in order to provide a session to show or to find out what your resonant frequency is. So, for example, if you are doing, and I would recommend this as a first step with any kind of practice at all, you would say, okay, I want to start by looking at, I don't know, 6 breaths a minute, and I want to take my client in a series of steps up to 8 breaths a minute. Okay, and you can do that in, I don't know, half breath a minute steps, or 0.1 or 0.2, depending on how often you want to do it. Let's assume, for example, that we take a view and we say, okay, your resonant frequency is somewhere between 6 and 8 breaths a minute. We don't know where. So we want to go up from 6 to 8 in half breath per minute increments. Okay? And we want to have each segment or each test point of a minute each. So you can have a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever. Okay? Now, question for you, Deborah. Mm-hmm. When you train breath, do you do in and out, or do you do inhale, hold, exhale, rest?
A couple of ways. You can very easily train your out breath. It's actually easier than the in breath. So you get them to slow the out breath, and they'll go into a very relaxed state. In fact, I often suggest to people who are tensing up and realize that they're hyperventilating or breathing quickly to right away just stop everything and concentrate on their breath and just slow their out breath as much as they can. And that automatically brings down the whole autonomic nervous system. It's a very quick way. In fact, you really don't need to train it with biofeedback, because once we pay attention to our breath, we can get very quick control over it. Problem is, it's often below our threshold of awareness because it's such an automatic function that we don't even think about our breath until it's too late. We're about to pass out because we're hyperventilating so quickly. So if you realize that's going on, or even if a person is going into a panic state, if they simply stop and try to slow their out breath, right then and there, it's going to really slow the whole system down.
Totally, I absolutely agree. In fact, what I'm showing you here is not biofeedback. This is purely follow the pacer. So, from what Deborah's just said, for example, you could say, I want to the inhale to be 40% of the time, and I want the exhale to be 60% if you want the out-breath to be longer. Once you've got that, insert. In the accessories, there's a pacer. And there we go. So it goes up. So you basically just follow the breath. So as the column is going up, you get your client to breathe in. And when it's going down, you get them to breathe out. And notice we've got this at 40-60 here. And you would do this for a minute. The software would then click on to 6.5 breaths a minute, then 7 breaths a minute, then 7.5, and then 8. And then once the session is finished, you can go back and analyze which of those breaths actually provided you with the highest HRV. Okay? Very, very simple. So I don't know, can we just check how many people have actually got this version of the software? If you can start your Villistas software, okay, so let me just stop the screen so I can see. Just hands up, please, who has this version? Okay, brilliant. So if we can just start the software and go into configuration and pacer. And what I'd recommend is that we go from 6 breaths a minute to 8. Personally, I would go with 50-50 inhale and exhale at the moment, and see how that goes. You may choose later on to change that based on your practice. I mean, I understand Deborah probably would go 60-40. Deborah, what would you suggest?
Even a wider variation. I mean, I would probably go, if that's how you're doing this, 80-40. I would really slow that out breath. You want to actually exaggerate it at first, and then they can relax. Now, let me tell you what the heart math process is. They actually give you the sine wave, and for a lot of people, that's easier to follow than up and down. Although that's a fine signal too. Either one will work, but it is on the same principle. And what they're doing is tracking the heart variability at the same time that they are tracking your breath. And so it is a very quick way of synchronizing the two of them and slowing the breath down and increasing the variability. So they're tying it very much together. I'm not sure if yours is doing that as well, is it?
You can. If you were to put the BBP sensor on the finger, you could then see the pulse at the same time.
Okay, so that's how you would do it with the Ballistus. You would okay, got it.
Also, you know, I would, rather than speeding up breath, I tend to, you know, train to slow them down. I work with a client population of PTSD and high anxiety and, you know, quite a number of issues, so that, you know, and some people have difficulties breathing. You know, they have a history of asthma or allergies or something else. But I was just thinking, the Tibetans don't say you've actually arrived until you can do one complete breath in 3 minutes. So I've not really seen anyone be able to do that yet, but they say that that's what your goal for enlightenment is, to have one complete breath in at least 3 minutes.
Okay. Good luck with that. I think I'd be dead at that point. But yes, I accept what you're saying. Okay. What I'd like to do is...
You want to really slow the out breath, though. I mean, we're not talking about more rapid breathing, so I'm not sure how this works with your system, how you determine those numbers.
Okay, so you would change the percentage of in-breath to out-breath. So in this case, we've got an in-breath of 35% of the time and an exhale of 65% of the time. So
what does that look like? You know, what I'm doing, the way I'm figuring it out with your system, when you set those percentages and then show us the graphic, one can get an idea of how slow or how rapid that is and what the relative relationship between the in-breath and out-breaths are. That's the way I'm figuring it out.
Okay, well, I can show you. Let's go to the pacer.
Yes.
So this is 6 breaths a minute, and it's 35% in, 65% out. So that's in, fast, and then very slow out.
Can you also slow the in-breath a little bit relative to that? Because that's pretty fast in-breath.
Well, absolutely. That's why the whole point about you set what percentage of the time you want the in-breath and the out-breath, and whether you want to be able to, at the top, get them to catch their breath, if you like, and just hold it and then release it.
Which is another way of doing it, yeah.
Right, exactly.
And so, it's a yogic breath. That's what the yogis would do.
Precisely. So what we're trying to do here is say you've got pretty much ultimate flexibility. Given a breath, which is a sine wave, what do you want to do? How quickly do you want to go up? What do you want to do at the top? How quickly do you come down? And what do you do at the bottom? So if we go with this 35-65 as an example, actually, to be honest, it is a bit fast. I would go 45-55.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
If everyone wants to set that, so you've got the beginning rate at 6, the ending rate at 8, 45% in, 55% out, a segment period of 1 minute. In other words, you'll be breathing for 1 minute at 6 breaths, then you'll be breathing for 1 minute at 6.5, 1 minute at 7, 7.5, and 8. Okay?
But now you're
away.
increasing the breathing rate. Won't you go the other way and slow it?
Yes, you can. I mean, you can start at 8 and go down to 6, or start at 6 and go up to 8. It's entirely, what we try to do is make this as flexible as possible, depending on what you want to do.
So you can independently set all parameters. You can also set a hold on this at the top of the breath. In other words, the in-breath, and then you can set the hold and then start the out-breath. So really, you control all of this. There is nothing automatic about it. You got to determine all of this for your individual client, correct?
I would say that yes. Based on your experience as a therapist, you would say, I'm going to start it with this, and if it proves to be wrong, then I can adjust the parameters. But yeah.
I think that is what Gary was bringing up, and that would directly address maybe what he is concerned about, because he would be setting it individually for each of his clients.
I think you're right. I mean, someone with PTSD would have a completely different breath profile than someone who had asthma.
And one of the things that I find on HeartMath as a power spectrum is most useful, because that gives a resonant frequency at 0.1, and depending on which way the power spectrum slides, whether it's going right or left away from that, can be adjusted by adjusting the breathing frequency.
Yes, absolutely.
Fairly quick way of seeing that. Do we have a power spectrum readout with this?
Yes, you do. So let me just load a blood volume pulse session. So you've got within the software the HRV summary. So this is a fairly bad session, I have to say. So you've got, for example, there's the pulse over a 5-minute session, there's the IBI distribution, and there's the power spectrum. So you can take this at any point, just like you can segment a session with the Mind Mirror. You can segment a minute of data from a session of BVP and see the frequency distribution for that.
Okay, so we're using straight BVP on getting these readouts here.
Right. I mean, you can use an ECG sensor if you wanted, but to be honest, a blood volume pulse sensor is just as good. The only reason to have an ECG is if you're not getting a particularly good signal from the fingertip or from the earlobe, and you need to put the ECG on the inside of the wrists.
Okay.
Now this is a summary window, this power spectrum. Were you asking about live power spectrum window, Gary, that you would see during the recording?
No. No, you can see a live power spectrum on the HeartMath. But generally I look at the results of maybe 3 or 5 minutes to see where, usually 5 minutes, to see where we are. Also, the new Pro system gives you a 1 minute readout that's correlated with someone wearing your heart monitor for 24 hours. So
right. So there's the session. And just to show you that for a minute, I don't know whether you know these. This is a 5-minute session of BVP. Right. I can put a marker, a time-based marker in here of a minute. Okay, so there's a 5-minute session broken up into 5 segments. I can right-click on any segment and show the statistics for that minute. Great. So there's the power spectrum for that minute.
Okay, great. I
love it.
Yeah, I haven't used the BVP on this system yet. Right. So, I'll have to play with it and see what we got.
It's very sophisticated. It's very nice.
Good. Glad you like it.
I did this with Steve online, and I found that I was breathing too slow. I was breathing like 4 times a minute, and when I sped up to 6 times a minute, my brain was more oxygenated. It boosted my metabolism. It really surprised me.
If you go too far, you're going to hyperventilate. But that's the whole point.
But you've trained yourself so long over time to achieve this, very relaxed state and keep yourself in that relaxed state. You're starting at a very different baseline than someone else who's, living a very anxious kind of life. So it really needs to be individualized to that person's baseline.
Yeah, but my point being that you can actually be breathing too slow.
Oh,
for
yeah.
your
Oh,
mental
yeah. Oh, no. No, no,
and your physicality. Yeah, that really surprised the heck out of me. I had no idea. I felt an immediate blast of oxygen at the six breaths per minute.
And probably
And you
energy.
probably find the heart rate variability exploded.
Yeah.
Judith, next time you're about to pass out, just speed up a bit.
Right. Right on over.
It's not
right
passing out, it's falling asleep or going into a trance state.
Well,
Right.
that's why you would use this.
That's right. That's exactly so. You need them all.
Well,
Absolutely.
would you be willing to do the 5-minute test for us, Steve, and guide us through it if everybody raised their hand and wanted to?
Sure, I have no problem with that.
Peter wants it. Gary wants it. Okay, Oksana. Okay, that's the majority. Thank you. I know it's kind of boring to sit there for 5 minutes while we do this, but it's all, a lot of it's about muscle memory, isn't it? Motor control.
Right.
So you say, all right, so I've got mine configured at where you had it last, which was for inhale 45, exhale 55, hold 0, rest 0, RF segment period 1, RF segment steps 0.50, and then
Right.
breaths, 6 to 8 breaths up at the very top. And then
Right. So what that's going to do.
You also said that, so we're going to then go to accessories and bring up the pacer, which can be, of course, resized. And then did I understand you to say that if we wanted to see what Deborah was suggesting, the actual wave, then we would go and get the raw data window for the BVP? Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that's probably a step too far for this demonstration. Let's just stick with the pacer.
Pacer.
Well, if we wanted to do it, we would just watch the wave.
The challenge with watching the wave is that you'll be behind the curve, because when you're watching the waveform of your own breath, your pulse, essentially you're about, I don't know, half a second behind where you actually are physically, because it takes half a second to work out what your pulse is, because it's taking the RR interval of the previous beat, your heartbeat, and this heartbeat, and saying, what's your current heart rate? So, you are potentially at least half a second out in terms of phase. So I'm not a fan of doing that. But hey, go ahead if you want to try it.
See, HeartMath has compensated for that lag.
Right.
They've compensated so you can see it. So it's direct feedback and it's in real time. That's
right. The challenge with the compensation is it's an algorithm, and you're never quite sure how they've done it.
Well, that I don't know. Yes.
Okay. Well, is everybody ready to turn on their DSUs and get their Volista screens up and say go?
Okay, so all you need to do is put the pacer on the screen. I would be inclined to make it long and thin like that, because then you get a much better view of the inhale and the exhale. Judith, why don't you share your screen so that we can see yours?
Oh, great, yes, great idea. Great idea.
Okay.
Because a lot of us don't have anything set up.
Right.
Okay.
Before you go any further, actually, can you just stop? I want to show you something. Precisely on that point, just exit that, please, Judith. Exit. And yes, go to File, Open Existing Session. And tick the box at the bottom that says Anonymized Client Names. That's it, and press Exit. That's fine.
Oh, wow.
So press Exit, please.
Actually, yeah, now I know where I am. I'll record it under my name. All right. There I am.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
My thing said that I had to have my in-breath and out-breath equal. Is that a different version?
I think it probably said, yeah, maybe. Maybe can we take that at the end, and I'll take a look and see what your version is.
Okay.
You're getting congestion here, Judith, simply because the amount of processing power that Zoom is taking.
I feel super oxygenated.
That's a little fast.
Okay, so you notice the pacer has now gone to 7 beats a minute. It says at the top of the little window there, pacer 7 BPM. So we've gone from 6.5 now to 7. I suspect you're going to find this too fast, Judith, but we'll go with it.
I don't know. I can feel the blood moving all the way to my toes.
I don't know, Judith. You know, it's awful fast for you.
Now, bear in mind that you can actually do this you can go up in tenths of a breath. So, you know, you can be very fine in terms of how you detect the resonant frequency. Okay, so now we've gone to 7.5 breaths a minute. This is probably going to work. If you can feel your toes, goodness knows what you're going to be able to feel now.
It's like having a cup of coffee.
Electronic caffeine, now there's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's what those chemicals are doing to our bodies.
Yeah, quite.
You just saved yourself $2.
I mean, really, that's exactly right. $3.50.
Okay, so there was a little bleep there. Now we've gone to 8 breaths a minute. So now, Starbucks, here you come.
Oh, boy. Why would you want to go in that direction, though? I mean, I guess Judith wants to go in that direction, but most of your clients are going to want to go the opposite way.
Right, you can go the opposite way. That's no problem at all.
Okay. Yeah,
You basically say the starting is 8, the finishing is 6.
Exactly.
It's entirely up to you.
Yep. Do you notice how it has like a calming effect just watching your own breath? I mean, not at the pace you're going, but I mean, if you were going in the opposite direction.
You're all in training and getting revved up, right?
Okay, so there we go. Basically, that's saved the session, so you don't even need to think about that. So if you just close that, please, Judith. Go to view.
Settings going to save now? Will you be on those same settings, or do you have to reset it each time?
No, it's saved that. So if you could just click on that one, please, Judith. Notice it says HRV resonant frequency analysis. No.
No.
Okay, fine. Right, go to view, summary, and look at the raw data. It doesn't really go for the BVP heart rate, the pulse rate. Yeah, that's fine. That was the second one down.
This one.
Yep, that's it.
That's one we always look at.
Wow.
Okay.
Even Stephen, this is the same kind of heart rate. I normally have a very sharp and lots of peaks and valleys. What do you call that? Irregular heart rate. And I had this exact same kind of view when I did the eye awake meditations, the binaural beats. I was astonished. It had the same effect that this had on me.
Okay, so let's just do a quick analysis of this. One thing we're working on, by the way, is that this analysis will be automatic, but for now it isn't. So if you just like to go to the second segment, which starts at about 30 seconds in.
This one?
That one there, right click on it. Okay, and HRV statistics, yeah, that'll be good, thank you. Okay, so the HRV index there is 10.4. Do you want to do the same with the next section, please, Judith?
Are you going to remember what they are? Because these won't save, right?
I'm writing them down. Don't worry.
You're writing them down. Okay, so that was 68 heart rate, HRV index 10.4, stress index 4.5. That's a high stress index for me. The breath rate was high. All right. That's a different HRV index, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There was 10.4 before?
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
Lower stress index, though.
That's right.
Is the
That's
heart rate
you're
lower?
breathing so fast.
Is the heart rate higher or lower?
Now the heart rate's the same. The HRV is less. The PNN50 is higher. Okay, and then the final one. Yeah, we just do that one. That's fine.
Heart rate's back up. HRV is back up. Stress index is back up.
Yeah, because you're breathing fast.
Absolutely. Do the final one.
That is it. I mean, if you meant the third one.
Sorry,
This
no,
one right here, right?
No, the one that starts at 3 minutes 20. Next to it. Keep
Don't I need to put in a marker or or it'll crash? Don't I need to put a marker in here? No?
Nope.
Oh, nice.
Look
Okay.
Look.
HRV is back down. So, wow, there's a lot of variation here.
Well, there should be. You're increasing your breath. You were in training to a more rapid breath with each 30-second interval or whatever we've got here.
It was a minute interval, but yeah, absolutely.
Minute, you're getting faster and faster, and your heart rate variability is showing the same variation, and your stress index. And if you go the other way, it's going to be more relaxing. And what you will see is you have systematically trained the person to relax. But we went, faster breathing instead of slowing breathing.
Well, the cool thing is that the stress index of this one, though, it looks like my body must have compensated somehow, because the stress indexes we're supposed to have is 2 to 3.
So you see there how you can easily, as I say, in the next version of this software, what we've just done manually by going segment by segment will be printed out in a report so you can actually see them in one go. That's something we're working on at the moment. But you can very quickly get to see which is the best one for you.
Yeah. 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 And John Coates works with HRV all the time and did this fantastic program with Oksana that I would just remind everybody exists. It's up on the webinar website. It's just spectacular. Oksana did this PowerPoint presentation and showed us all these things inside of Ballistus that I didn't know what they were. The R to R intervals and the Poincare or Poincare plot and the IBI distribution, and then now Steve has added to that what you saw was the power spectrum thing. I don't think we've got an explanation of the power spectrum. I'd be curious, what is the power spectrum?
It's a way of looking at the underlying frequency of the breath basically in much smaller chunks. So if you go to, rather than, no, don't do it in that. Just, can you go to the view and HRV summary? Let's do the whole thing.
Okay, this would be for the whole session. Okay.
Right. Okay, so if you look at the power spectrum.
Can you tell us what these mean? What's the blue, what's the green, and the red?
Okay, so these are the VLF, the LF, and the HF. Okay, so very low frequency, and high frequency. The very low frequency is kind of the long term. I mean, we don't really do a great deal with that with Vilisys. The LF is I always get this the wrong way around, is the autonomic nervous system, and the HF is the other one. Is the way I usually look at this. Am I right in that, Gary?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
You show it as the green.
Right.
Yeah.
You're looking for the green. That's all you have to remember.
Yeah, that's basically the resonant frequency. You go, over to towards the zero end of the frequency here. You're looking at the sympathetic nervous system, and as you start to move over into the red over here, you're looking at parasympathetic. You don't want too much of either one.
You need a balance.
Balance, and I say the 0.1 is generally considered to be the resonant frequency for the individual's heart, and where you want to be. So you want to be closer to this 0.1 area here. So that's a balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic tones of the nervous system, and let's say healthier in general.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Very powerful stuff.
So is the way that it is with heart math that that you have this on a live screen and you can adjust your breathing to get to the 0.1?
Yes, that's exactly the point, and that's what the
there.
training's about.
Yeah, and you can do this power spectrum on a live screen on HeartMath. I don't use it too much, but occasionally I'll switch to it, and you can see the bars going up and down as the person's breathing and where they're moving in this power spectrum.
Okay, I see. But the main thing is, to what height do you want the green?
All the way to the top.
You want the green, all of the green, to be as tall as this one bar is, going up to 30 something?
You'll never get that. What you're looking for is a peak in that green area. But it would be better if there was more green than there was the red and the blue. The stress index is in fact the green divided by the red.
So the blue means sympathetic arousal.
No, that's the long-term stuff that you would need in order to look at that realistically. You'd need a session lasting hours.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
So
Well,
really,
if I look at this point carre. Okay, you told me one time that when I didn't and couldn't understand what these meant, but had to try to explain them to somebody else, that what we want is all these little dots grouped together.
What you want is basically, well, hang on. What this shows is it's another way of showing the difference in the RR interval from beat to beat, okay? So if we look at that number, the fourth number along, the PNN50, what that is showing is that in terms of the beat, the individual heartbeat, okay, that for 12.5% of the time, your heart was beating differently by 50 milliseconds.
Yeah, that's why I didn't understand your explanation before. I think I liked it better when it was either the dots were all close together or there were a few dots that were slung out. You started to get the
What that's actually showing is that, okay, you're not really looking at the, you're looking at the cluster. The cluster is actually a lozenge shape. If it was round, then it would basically mean that you don't have any variability at all. What that's showing is that at least you're getting a measure of variability. The longer the lozenge, the greater the variability.
Okay, now I got you. And the other thing was that this IBI distribution, we wanted, I think, the pyramid to all be kind of together, whereas this is not my usual pyramid at all.
That's not a problem. I mean, the HRV index is what's known in the trade as a triangular index. So what it does is it's basically simple calculus. you count, you basically sum all those columns together and divide it by the tallest one, and that gives you your HRV index.
Okay. Okay, groovy. So I bet you other people have questions and comments on that, possibly, and possibly other things. And then we haven't heard from John Coates, who specializes in this in a clinical setting. And I wonder, John, if you have any comments about all this or tips for us or anything.
Yeah, sure. I've seen probably up to 400 people now for testing their HRV. I do a little bit of resonant frequency breathing with them, show them that. I sit on 6. I was training them or finding out their absolute resonant frequency, which is somewhere between 7 and 4.5. Start off at 7 and take them down 2-minute steps at half a breath down to 4.5, and that, in that bracket is their resonant frequency. I use Thought Technology ProQuant Infinity, which is a little bit more complex perhaps. So I think the seminar or the webinar went off the heart rate variability emphasis quite a bit, and talking about slow breathing works for everyone. Well, it doesn't. The idea with the resonant frequency breathing is to breathe at that rate, say for about 10 minutes a day, split up throughout the day. Say 2 or 3 minutes at a time. Now, the people I see are very, very sick. They've all got fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or both. Some people can't even breathe for 2 minutes without virtually collapsing in a heap. So it has to be taken very slowly and gradually and build up to it. Early days, the gurus used to indicate 20 minutes twice a day. And the doctor that refers the people to me said, there's no way known my clients can do that. So we set on 10 minutes, spread out throughout the day, and possibly before you go to sleep. If you wake up during the night, do it. And I'll do it again when I wake up and perhaps throughout the day. The idea is, with the resonant frequency breathing, is to increase the baroreflex gain. Now, the baroreflexes are sensors in the carotids and the aorta, and they respond to blood pressure changes. And this is where you get the health benefits, and this is reflected in the power in the low frequency. The more you've got there, the better. When you're breathing slowly, if you're not breathing slowly, it represents something else again. So sort of the slow breathing distorts all these things. Now, if anyone's interested, I can show you a screen that I use, and it might clarify it a bit, perhaps, I don't know. I've got a routine I use because I'm only doing heart rate variability, and I'm trying to find out if there's autonomic dysregulation for the old doc. And so I've got this little routine I've set up now. That's how I run through people. I do a baseline first for 5 minutes. This gives me that basic physiology. Then I'll do the strict colour test. Then I give them a rest. Then I get them to talk about their issues, because I find a lot of people do start to dysregulate when they're talking about their health issues. Another rest period. Then I get people breathing at 6 breaths a minute. I was finding out the resonant frequency, but it takes 12 minutes roughly. That's constant breathing at 2 minutes, going down from 7 to 4.5. Some people just couldn't handle it, so I just set on 6 breaths a minute, which was the nominal rate that the gurus thought was it originally, but it varies in people, somewhere between 7 and 4.5. So I'll just show you this guy's baseline. Okay, I'll get it running for a while, then I'll pause it. I'll speed it up, otherwise we'll be here all day. Got to wait 64 seconds before we get the spectrum up here, and this will just be a graph of the spectrum when it gets up here. Okay, there it is. This is what happens live. This is your parasympathetic. This is basically your sympathetic. Now, my understanding is the blue, which is on the velocitus, in the short-term recording, represents worry, rumination, and possibly anxiety. And also, according to Paul Lehrer, one of the gurus, it represents asympathetic, which has got a lot to do with the power of the heartbeat and how quickly it beats, I believe. So that's the guy's baseline on a day-to-day basis. Now, over here is the interbeat interval, which flashes all the time. And it's not showing up too. What's happened here? There's the SDRR. Now, the gurus seem to indicate anything under 50 is poor health, 50 to 100 is compromised health, and above 100 good health. So this person ain't too well. It represents all the frequencies that the heart puts out, and it's a good representation of people's self-regulation and their ability, their ability to self-regulate and their overall resilience. So resonant frequency breathing will improve that number. And this one here, which I'm afraid, I'm running this on the Mac with parallels and it's not looking the best, but heart rate max minus min is the highest heart rate less the lowest heart rate in the breathing cycle. And the bigger that number, the better too. Athletes can be 20 or 30, 40. But most people I see are probably about anything from 2 to 10. But the breathing, resonant frequency breathing will increase that and increase that. Now, I'll go out of that one and show you, I'm not sure how this guy went on his resonant frequency breathing, but we'll whack it on anyway. And I'll speed it up, not quite as fast perhaps. I'll speed it up to get it up to, okay, you can see the difference now. The breathing and the heart rate are going up and down together, and that's what we're looking for. Now to go a bit further. Okay, and what we're looking for is no red, no blue, and all the power at round about 0.1. Can I move this over here out of the way? Yeah, I'll drop that down there. I'll just run it a little bit further. Now this is something that confuses me with Velistas, because this ratio here, which is a level of stress, but when you're breathing at your resonant frequency, this can leap up dramatically because resonant frequency breathing distorts the normal pattern on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
Now, down here was, ideally this should be green all across the top, because this is just a graphical version of that. And there should be no red and no blue. But this person is probably getting a little bit weary after a minute and a half. And I see this quite a bit. So he's tapering off. So ideally that should be across the top, constant green. Just making sense, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Very useful.
Breathing rate, because I've got a sensor around the middle for breathing, and I use ECG, not BVP. This is a raw ECG, which is, I see this a lot, there's no constant sort of peak. Up here is the interbeat interval, and you can see that this guy was 18, I think, roughly, in the baseline, but a little bit of breathing has increased that to 55. Now, that doesn't stay in. It doesn't, just because you've done it once means it's going to be there all the time. It takes a practice, and it can take 1 or 2 months to get a constant sort of increase. So it's not something that happens overnight, unfortunately. If it was, I'd be a multi-millionaire by now, I think, because one session and they're fixed. But it don't work that way. I don't know if I've confused people or helped anyone.
Yeah, I love this this readout. It's much more thorough than the heart map.
Yeah, yeah, because you haven't got a breathing sensor with the heart map, have you?
No.
No.
No, that's what I thought. Yeah, you can see this guy was losing it. He lost that. What I'll do, I'll put that up as a put it up as a static display, perhaps. You can get a better idea what it looked like overall. Okay, there you go. So he started out quite well and then lost it a little bit. And you can see this was a bit all over the place, but above all, he kept most of the time he was in that right range. I've seen this go up to 50 and 60 in some people when they're breathing. So I'm not quite sure how all this relates to the Velistas with that stress index, which you say have to be low. Well, when you're breathing slowly, it has to be high.
Basically, as you say, when you start manipulating the waveform, the stress index really isn't relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't use it much. It's just I get them breathing, and once I've done all this information goes into Kubios, which analyzes it and comes up with pretty graphs, all the stats.
Absolutely. That's what I
And this
use.
is what you use that, do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you get into the correlation dimension, D2?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to find someone who knows more than I do on it. That's quite a clever one.
I was going to ask you.
A lot of people, it should go down under stress and up when you're resting. But a lot of the people I see, it goes down under stress and up when resting. Now, I found a paper by a guy, a professor in Innsbruck, and I've communicated with him, and he seemed to think that means low cortisol levels, and it goes in the reverse to what it should be. Which he did some work with lupus patients, and when I wrote to him, and he said, "Looks like you've confirmed that sick people have low cortisol, not necessarily high cortisol." So something has to be looked at too, I guess.
Now, what were you saying correlates with the cortisol level?
The correlation dimension is a non-linear analysis of the frequencies of the heart. Most of this stuff is linear. This is non-linear. And D2 is a metric that comes out of Kubios. And if the reading goes up under stress and down resting, it indicates it's low cortisol. It should go the other way. It should go down under stress and up when resting. Then you've got to take into account, is it acute or chronic stress? And I get both in one person.
Yeah, because we're doing a lot of cortisol studies with the emotional freedom technique. And in fact, we did that all week with our client population. I was using the HeartMath Pro to get a baseline reading on these people along with their cortisol results. So, you know, it's just the data hasn't even been analyzed yet, so I don't know what the results will be. But I was just interested in what you were saying about the relationship between cortisol and heart rate variability.
Yeah, the metric D2 apparently measures the complexity of the heart rather than, it takes into a lot more account than the linear methods, which is all this other stuff. But I think the whole matter is to get people breathing at their resonant frequency, and Bliss just does it quite well, and you can get the benefits from that. But I like the idea of starting at 7, going down to 4.5. And there's a little gadget that does that, but it's by the by. And that's probably the best way, and not going up, but rather going down. But it can be quite...
basically, you can do either with Phyllis. I accept that you should go down rather than up.
Yeah. Some of the people I see, I stopped doing the full routine because people find it too stressful. So I just said, okay, breathe, express a minute, which was considered it for a long time, I believe. But further research showed it was somewhere between 7 and 4.5 in most people.
That sounds good, John. I wonder, can we go back to me screen sharing for a second? Because I have a question I want to ask Steve about ballistas. Thank you very so much for sharing that. My question, Steve, is that I know I get that I can go to configuration and pacer and change from what John was suggesting, the 7 to 4 and a half. Well, right, 7 to 4.5, John. That's what it was you were saying.
Yep.
That's your best test. And then Deborah, were you saying that the inhale and the exhale should be different?
Yeah, I usually ask people to try to slow their out breath. So the in breath is a little bit faster than the out breath.
So it's going to be 35 to 65, something like that?
No, that inhale is too short. So raise it a little bit, maybe 45.
Uh-huh.
And then
this is...
I'd raise that a little bit to maybe 60.
You can't,
65.
because it has to be 100%.
It's going to be 100%.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Well, this is great. Okay, so then keep that at 40 and make the exhale 60. Try that. 40, 60.
All right, so that would be good, but what I find is that I don't need to hold the breath at the top, but at the bottom, I need to rest.
Okay, put
So
a hold in there a little bit.
I would be inclined to put a 55 here
Okay.
and then a 5% here. Does that make any sense to both of you, John, Deborah, Gary,
Can't
all of
you
you?
add the rest, Steve, can you add the rest separately? That's not part of that 100%, it's a separate?
No. It is basically the cycle is 100%. So you would
The
say,
whole thing, okay.
yeah. So you would say, as Judith's done there. So you inhale for 40%, exhale for 55, hold for 5, and then start again.
Okay, great.
What I do when I'm teaching a meditation is I have people pace themselves by the exhale, and so they may start out at say 6 breaths a minute, and then as the exhale lengthens, I tell them to increase the inhale to match the exhale. And over a 20-minute period, what I'll see is if that breath will continuously slow down. So you may get down to 3 breaths a minute, even sometimes 2 breaths a minute, doing meditation, which produces a very relaxed state and also seems to energize at the same time. You're dilating the blood vessels, getting more oxygen into the system when you're doing that. So it's a different approach to meditation, but I'm not necessarily training people to breathe in a resonant frequency or anything. I'm just allowing the breath to naturally slow down as they go into meditation.
But that's a very good baseline protocol to get somebody to relax.
Yes.
Same thing can be used, you just, will make adjustments where they feel the best.
Well, this is an interesting series of ideas here, because so for me, breathing a little faster than I was breathing energized me. But Gary, you're saying that by relaxing someone, allowing the blood vessels to dilate, that often gets more oxygen in. So it sounds like it could go both ways. Like
it's very important that you
to 8 to see if that's going to be more energizing. And it might be for me, or for regular people who are learning to meditate, then they can go down.
But Judith, it's very important that you're using diaphragmatic breathing.
Absolutely.
I do some Neigong techniques that use a full breath, starting with the expansion of the lower rib cage, and then breathing into the back and actually up the back, keeping the shoulders still. So it's a whole protocol of training a full breath and a slow breath, so that you're actually getting more and more air into the lungs. And you actually, if you do a slow inhalation, you actually increase the volume of air that you're taking in. So you can do a quick breath, you might be taking in, say, 2,000 cc's, but if you slow that breath down, you could be taking in 6,000 to 8,000 cc's of air. So it's a big difference.
And it's not only oxygenating, it's also affecting the heart. The rhythms are tied together so that you are interacting with your heart when you're changing your breath. So they're interacting, but I agree with everything that you're saying, Gary, as far as using the diaphragm. And I for people who need to fall asleep, I often go through a protocol of having them lie on their back, when they're in bed, but actually put their hand on their abdomen and feel that expand as they're taking an in-breath, and then feel it decrease, like, deflate like a balloon. I have a whole imagery that goes with it. But you're right, it's the diaphragmatic breathing as well as how fast or how slow you're breathing. So there are a number of components that go into the protocol. I mean, we're just touching on little bits and pieces and putting a picture together for the ballistists, but using it, for different, for different purposes, you're going to change your protocol and you're going to adjust it to the individual person as well. So it's not one shoe fits all. It's customizing the shoe to the individual person. And that's why a system, a biofeedback system, works so well for doing this kind of training, like heart math and maybe like the ballistas, you know, because it helps you to customize it to that individual's physiology.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question there for Steve about this was that what we did was we looked at each one of these separate sections. So this is section 1 here. So yeah. What am I actually looking for? Am I looking for the highest HRV index? Is it that simple?
For the purpose of this, okay, the key number it would be the HRV index and the PNN50. I would go with the HRV index.
Okay, so the one that's the highest, and there was one that was highest, that's it. Yeah, that's the one that, well, unless I go then down to 4 to 6 and then find a higher.
Right.
But I guess you're saying that we could do actually a longer test, couldn't we? I mean, yeah. This got some nice controls in here. So we could actually do, I could have done, well, we call it 7 to 4.5, but I could have done it, would this be the control?
Yeah. Yes.
Segment steps.
So you could go down in 0.25, for example.
Okay. And so that is going to let me have a longer test?
Yes.
Or what?
So you'll go...
A longer test, more graduation between these numbers?
Well, in that case, I would change the segment period 2 to 2 minutes. So that will be quite a long analysis session, but it means that you're getting better data. Because obviously in 1 minute, if you get any kind of artifact in the waveform, that will affect the data because it's only taking 1 minute's worth of data. So having 2 minutes of the data gives you a better chance of getting more consistent information.
Steve, does ballistas take out artifacts?
Yes, it does.
Good. Yeah, pursed lip out breathing out through pursed lips.
I personally don't. No, I mean, we don't recommend anything. I mean, it's basically how you would want to do it.
Yeah, well, that is a recommended way by the experts. So it's a chronic obstructive pulmonary problem, out breath, and you're pursing your lips. You can slow your out breath a lot better, and you can control it a lot better. And you never breathe way out. So you just keep a little bit left in so it's not all that it's nice relaxed breathing, slow waves, if you like.
Yes.
The system I was using for resonant frequency breathing without any breaks would take 12 minutes.
Right.
And just the people I was dealing with, they couldn't handle it.
No, I understand that. You have to tailor this setup to the client.
Oh, definitely. But if you want to find the resonant frequency breathing, you have to go through a routine from 7 to 4.5 or whatever you pick on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The best range, and you don't sort of say, well, this person could be between here and here. You have to find out definitively which one it is. Otherwise, you're not going to get the benefits for the people. And we are talking about heart rate variability training and increasing heart rate variability.
Yes.
Well, I can see that this is a pretty complicated subject because going from 7 to 4.5 would be to find a resonant frequency for meditation. But as I discovered with Steve, my resonant frequency for sitting at a computer and working is more like 6.25 breaths per minute rather than my usual 4 when I'm, zenning around in life or meditating. So, so it's definitely a subject and something that we could all experiment with and learn a little bit more about, and then maybe come back and ask Steve some questions like this one. I have another question, Steve.
Yeah, go for it.
Tell me a little bit about this. What's going to happen if this is set at 0.25 rather than 5? It's going to switch over to 4.5, and then it's going to go to 4. It's going to go to 5.25.
Start at 7, go to 6.75, 6.5, 6.25, 6, 5.75, 5.5, 5.5,
Okay.
Or whatever.
So that will make it a longer session
Yes,
because I've got it set for 2 minutes.
correct.
So maybe I'd actually really want to have it set back where you had it to start with.
Yeah,
Here.
I mean, that's a good approximation, half a breath.
No, maybe that makes it a longer session.
No, that halves the number of sessions. That halves the time, doesn't it?
You're doing less.
Well, I don't mind a long session. It's fine. It's fine to have a longer session. I mean, I think it's really worth doing, and worth doing when we're in an ordinary waking consciousness, and worth doing when we're, you know, in a meditation to find out which is which. Because clearly there is, for me, a big difference. I don't need to be doing Zen breathing at 4 or 3. I have actually done that thing, but only in meditation where you breathe once every 3 minutes. You know, I'm sure everybody has. You kind of wake up and you go, oh, good thing I woke up to breathe. But that's probably not active enough for ordinary life, except for those guys, those Zen guys. So there's one other thing that I had intimated that we would show you. It's a little scary to get into it, and we're at the 2-hour point now, but so let's save it for a future webinar. And it's that we've actually got something called a mind mirror pattern modifier now. And the reason we got it is for people like Alston Balcom and David Fairweather and other extremely dedicated enforced symmetry self-trainers who are having trouble getting down from training level 5 to 6. I mean, to 4. There seems to be some quantum leap for the brain where the brain says, I can do 50%. I'm an advanced meditator, and I can do 50% of the pattern ratios, and I can get all these anywhere from 85 to 98% rewards. But then I go to train on training level 4, and I'm frustrated because I can't get my brain to, I can't get enough rewards. I can't get that 70% rewards on training level 4 where my brain is learning best. So we put in something, Steve put in something called a mind mirror pattern modifier, but I think that this is something that we want to meet maybe in a Google Hangout or something and play with, because what it actually allows you to do, well, why am I telling you and not showing you? I mean, we won't talk too much about it this time, because honestly, I think it's a very long and interesting conversation. But the bottom line, can I do this? I don't know if I can actually do this. No, I need an EEG screen for this. Let me get my trusty House of Doors and get rid of the data here. And then this is before the save screen set was in here, so I do temperature window. Okay, so if you left click and then hit O on the desktop, you can get faster. You can get here way faster than going to configuration options mind mirror. So it's just going to land you in the same place, but the shortcut is left click, then the keystroke O. And then down here, we've got this thing that's a frequency adjustment. And this is how I think how the training level 5 people are going to be able to get down to training level 4. So they look at their patterns and review and they say, oh, you know what, I don't have enough theta. Let me add some more theta so that I really am working on the theta. And I've just got too much alpha. Let me give myself some more alpha, some less alpha, and let's see what that's going to do. And so then they go into the session and they turn on their training level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G. One more. scroll through the session a little further when things are all settled down. Okay, and then they turn on the T. Oh, I know that. I don't want the feedback. I want that off. All right, you see the change in the pattern? You got a different pattern now. So actually, I ended up showing this to you anyway, but what we need to do is have the discussion at a later time, because what we're basically doing is maybe what Swingle does. Not only taking somebody from a training level 5 to 4, but this might be what Swingle's doing, is that you can add theta. It's totally neurofeedback. It's very cool. See the pattern differences? Way more theta, way less alpha. And I think this is something like the resonant frequency that we could actually experiment with. And who knows what that pattern's going to be. You know, I was thinking about Peter when I wanted to introduce this to people. So, and wondering what Peter might say. Peter might say, you better not get away from that pattern. You better stick with the ratios of the pattern. But, and of course, for self-training and for training other people, we would want to stick with the ratios of the pattern. They're proven. We know that that's the best pattern. But wouldn't it be interesting if you could use that pattern modifier to create, for example, what we know to be the pattern of the channel, which is some alpha, way big theta, way big delta. Could you train yourself to channel that way with that pattern modifier using the self-training program and the rewards? Ooh, interesting question, isn't it?
Yes.
What do you think about, Peter? What do you think about that, Peter? Are we playing with fire? Would we be playing with fire?
Had any sense of ideal patterns? When you look at, particularly like healers, you know, they've got patterns where they just have massive amounts of delta and theta, and that's what they're doing. And no one's going to say that's good or what's bad. They're saying they're good at what they're doing, and that's the brain pattern. That's the feedback on it. And I've never really come across anyone where too much alpha's been a problem. I mean, it might happen, but that isn't usually my experience that that's going to be a problem. It's more like they're stuck on one side more than the other, that kind of thing.
We had one healer that we worked with. We hooked up the healer and the healee, and she walked into the room and passed her hands over the person and immediately went into a nice awakened mind pattern. She never had any training with it, but that's immediately what she did. And then she began to project energy into the area that needed healing. This is on the old Mind Mirror 3. Her delta went out to the wall. I mean, it just hit. Yeah. We went as far out as we could possibly open it up, I think 500 microvolts. And she was just hitting the wall at 500 microvolts. And this happened to the healee as well. Their delta jumped way out while she was doing the healing. So that was, you know, proof to us that a lot of healing occurs in delta. You know, though other people have found other like theta and alpha ranges, but for her it was delta. Also, before Steve and Judith jump off here, I want to talk to you more about buying some more electrode harnesses. So whoever I need to talk to about doing that, we need to get together.
We can do it afterwards. You and I can do it by email or Skype.
Yeah, let's just
Skype.
So
okay. I think this mind mirror pattern modifier is fascinating.
Yeah,
and it's certainly
that is
neurofeedback.
Yeah, it would work with. It looks like it would work with Swingle. And I just brought up my Ballistus, and I noticed I've got to download for a new program on that, so I'm going to have to, you know, do that. But yeah, it looks like you could modify the ratios to. Of course, you're reading off the different areas that Swingle does, which is a complication. So I'm not quite sure how to interpret the mind mirror readouts with Swingle's readouts. And like I say, maybe Andrea has a better insight into that than I do. I've just
Yeah, just send her an email and you guys get together. Let's play with this and play with resonant frequency and stuff. And I think it's really exciting. And I tell you, of all of this, of course, I'm not coming from the neurofeedback standpoint or the biofeedback standpoint, but I'm most excited about the ES meter. I'm telling you, when I was measuring, I had 3 people come in for practitioner trainings in a row and was using that temperature sensor in conjunction with the GSR and the BVP and the EEG, and you totally can tell where people are. There is just no mistaking it. There's no worry about somebody trancing out. You just watch that. I mean, the temperature goes up 9.4, 9.425. 9450, and if you start to see it drop, you know, you'll watch, and then because you're getting more information, because you'll watch their shoulders drop a little bit, then they'll catch themselves, and then up they go. I see Peter nodding. This is it's a real deal, right?
You want to catch it then and there. You see, you don't. It's not like you look at the statistics afterwards. Once they're losing the state they're trying to learn, then you need to interact if you can. That's what the moment-to-moment feedback's about. But it's more than that, you see. The other thing is, if someone has a sense that relaxation is going into this more lethargic state, then that's not something they can take when they're in an area of stress. It's as simple as that. They're going to be...
Wait, say that again? Say that again?
Well, if you're... Like when people say chill out, you see, you know, if you took it literally, chill out implies going into a more switched-off, drowsy state. So that you're cooling down, you're chilling out. And that's not a coincidence. It's just that's not what we mean when we're saying this alert relaxation. And the problem is, if that's what you're taking relaxation to be, it means you're not going to be able to take a relaxed state into a stressful situation, because you can't do drowsy. You've got to be alert, which means you're going to tend to come out of the relaxed state. It's kind of absolutely basic. You know, that's really what this whole thing about Zen states is about, is being able to, you know, keep the autonomic system calm while the brain's really with it, and you're connected and, you know, in choosing where your awareness is going to be and the way you respond. It's absolutely crucial, and that's the delight of that kind of feedback, the ES feedback, is that somebody can see just the difference in understanding it one way and misunderstanding it another way.
I think Alan Watts had an old joke about meditation was really the art of staying awake while falling asleep, which seems to summarize it.
Something like that. It's a big spectrum, meditation. Again, it's the same thing. It's not just like it's just this or it's just that, is it? And what you're trying to do is take aspects of it into situations where you're going to be and you're going to be responding. And if you like, on the, you know, Max's states, when he talks about a state 4 meditation and state 5, it's a difference between it being a more internalized state and being an externalized calmness and awareness. You know, and that transition is what it's about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of what Gary said. You don't get lost in theta. You become more awake and aware, but you're actually dropping in frequency. Your concentration of consciousness is dropping to lower frequency.
Well, and I think it's got a lot to do with the sort of control of the beta, really, as well. It's like who's choosing where your attention's going, particularly to what extent is your attention internalized. You know, working on internal computational stuff, and to what extent is it externalized? I mean, in NLP, they got this sort of rather extreme concept of like uptime and downtime. So if you're working computing, downtime means the thing's off and too bad, you know, the computer's off. But, you know, they'll say when someone goes internalized, that's downtime. In other words, they're not responding to real-time stimulation outside. And that's the problem. It's kind of the problem. It's like children, you sort of, you start getting the internalized stuff, and then that's where you live. And you lose this spontaneity of connecting to things going on outside.
I think, you know, not to get too far off topic here with the jhana meditations. There are 8 stages to jhana meditations. At stage 4, you are in what we would think of as the sort of the bliss ball, the evolved mind pattern, though I don't think anybody's measured it. But at that state, you're fully conscious internally, but you have no awareness of the external world at all, or very little. And you go into a profound state of bliss and joy, to the point where it's difficult to bring you back out of it until you're ready to wake up again. No one has really done, as far as I can see, I've tried to research this and find research on this. I can find only one study on jhana meditations using EEGs or MRIs, and it was, they had to throw out half the data because the person moved and they had a lot of artifacts, and it was never repeated. So, you know, this is something that we might want to do in the future, is if we have someone who actually understands jhana meditations, to see if they can go into, say, jhana 3 or jhana 4 and get into these very profound states. So I don't want to get too far off of the topic here, but, you know.
No, I think this is totally important. You see, what you're describing to me still, I suspect, comes within that bracket of what Max would call state 4 in terms of the EEG patterns. But you can't just say, oh, there's just meditation. You see, it's a whole realm which could involve an enormous level of sensitivity. It's just, it's internalized. So that's all, you know, under the bracket of meditative consciousness, if you like. That's my understanding anyway.
Something to think about, that's for sure. This has been such a good webinar that once Oksana edits it, this might be something we want to scroll around and watch some more. But I would just leave you with one thought and think about it and give me some feedback, if you will, you practitioners, practitioner trainees. I think we should put the temperature meter into the practitioner kit. It will raise the price of it, but it's such an invaluable tool. And now with this ES meter, I really think that we should be, can we resize the ES meter, Steve, so that we can put it on the screen as well?
Sure. Yeah.
I think we should be really monitoring this, and not only monitor it for the sake of that client, but start getting some data on it. And that data that we get, publish the data. Get it up on the MyMirror research page of the website, and then that will be a base for this guy who wants to take it and put it out into the corporate world, because he'd be putting the MyMirror out at the same time, and then he'll start using the EEG, and he's talking about sending it to all the psychologists in the UK, and he's living in Serbia now, so he's an international guy, and he's talking about a lot of psychologists. And if we really want this work to grow, of course we do, then toward the point of top of the mind recognition, then these are the studies are so important. They're just so critical. Robin gave us a copy of all of the Linda Tellington-Jones a study she did with EEG that quoted the Linda Tellington-Jones studies with Anna and the MyMirror. And I'm going to stick that thing up on the website, and just anybody and everybody has got studies with the MyMirror, because that's what's going to attract to us the people who have the funding to be able to do more research, and the research is what's going to pop us out into the top of the mind recognition, when people feel like they can really depend on what we're doing, and it's scientific, because, you know, that's what stopped the old mind from growing. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, people looked at Anna's, even at Esalen, they looked at that 30-year-old equipment which was falling apart. I had somebody attack me at Esalen and say, this can't possibly be working. Now, she changed her mind after she meditated a couple of times and found that she had a subjective and objective match, but that older equipment was decried. And now we've got this thing. This is the same technology, the same mind mirror pattern, so incredibly enhanced, and with everything integrated, there's no reason in this world that we shouldn't be slamming into top of the mind recognition worldwide with it. What stops us? Research. We need more research. We need studies. Let's get that study of yours. Gary, please send me a link to it. I've got Robin's. I'll get it up before the day's out, and let's start accumulating anything it ever can, especially with the ES meter right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do with Swengo, is to be able to take clients in, do a Swengo readout on them to see what's happening, and then go strictly to the mind mirror and train with the Awakened Mind pattern.
Fabulous.
Maybe sessions, or to see, you know, what level, move them up a few levels, maybe to level 5 or something, and then go back and do a post on Swengo. You know, of course, we need some control groups in there where people are just in weight groups and whatnot. But, you know, that's the kind of data that people are going to look at, researchers are going to look at, doctors are going to look at, psychologists are going to look at in the future, as to see whether or not the mind mirror is actually beneficial and doing something other than our fantasies about being enlightened.
Yeah, yeah. That's what they said before. It's all your subjective judgment. That's what that was the objection. They said this is all subjective. It wasn't subjective. I mean, Anna knew what she was looking at, and Max knew what he was looking at, and he was looking at from a research standpoint. But we got so much great data analysis now. There's no way anybody's telling us subjective. It is subjective from the client's experience, but it's all objective data. So we have something extraordinary here, and I'm so grateful to you, Peter, for introducing this ES meter to us. And, you know, maybe once we get some practice with it under our belts, we could get you back on here. And I would love to hear some stories. I mean, I know that you and Isabel were using this. I don't know if you were using it with Max was using the ES meter, or who developed it, or anything, but I would love to hear some stories and something we can record for posterity, how you were using it, and maybe you...
He always used temperature and ESR, but as 2 measurements, because there wasn't a machine that did it in one.
But you could map it nevertheless, because you had the values, and you could note, you would like notate the values on the ESR, and then create a mental map.
This ES type of feedback, I think, was Jeffrey Blundell's conception. I think it came really after Max had died. He realized how to interpret those in a clearer way. That's my sense anyway. It's piecing the bits together. You piece the bits together and suddenly you realize you're talking in a different language.
I've had a little bit of problem with between the British and the Americans, because the British use ohms and the Americans use micromos on the EDR or the ESR. So the conversions are a little bit strange.
Well, I mean, as an aside, you tell me what the conversion is from microohms to whatever it is, and I'll put that in for you.
Well, the micromos are just the inversion of the ohm, so it's 1
well, that's actually microsiemens, so that's the measure of conductance. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's no big problem, and I can read either way, but we're just here, we always use the micromos in all of the readouts on all of the equipment. The way things developed, I guess, historically.
Yeah, well, we're separated by common language as usual.
Yes, as usual. Even electronically.
But we have a wonderful common language with you, Steve, and thank you for sharing it and speaking it and showing us all of these things. And we'll do some research, test out the ES meter. I'm excited to get my my new temp sensor. And Deborah, you know, you said something about that temp sensor. We had trouble with it before. Melissa's turned around. Steve went straight to the factory that day, and they have a totally different design. And maybe you want to say something about that, Steve. I think it's more sensitive, works better, something.
It's a completely different technology. It's actually a thermocouple now. So it's much more reliable, much more stable, has a wider range, and a much more precise reading. Much better product. Much, much better product.
Thank you, Steve.